Hi. Welcome to Say It, I Dare You, the podcast where we pull apart the personal meanings of taboo and hard to say words and phrases with fun guests and some gentle peer pressure. If you like talking about words and life and love and weird things, then you've come to the right place. This podcast is for talking about things that kind of feel weird to talk about and hopefully making them feel less weird by talking about them. My name is Quinn. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a freelance writer and marketing consultant, a massive word enthusiast, and I'm really, really excited to bring the first ever episode of Say It, I Dare You to your ear holes. Today, we're talking about the word vagina with none other than my wonderful soon-to-be wife, Bridget. Hi, honey.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited for this. Bridget is an undergraduate student at Toronto Metropolitan University studying psychology, where she has spent the past 2 years also working in their psychology research lab as a researcher. She's an exceptional human, not that I'm biased or anything, and she is the polar opposite to me when it comes to feeling comfortable talking about uncomfortable things. So I'm very excited for this episode. So Bridget, to kick us off, why don't you tell us, why do you resonate with this episode title?
Well, as an owner of a vagina myself, I think it's just one of those things that growing up you are exposed to, like in health class and like being socialized as a female in today's society. And in my version of my upbringing, I grew up in a small town, and so there's a different type of censorship where, you know, you kind of just keep to surface level topics, and the topic of vaginas, sexual health, sexuality, like sex positive culture just like is not really that prominent in that setting. So like you said, I think I'm sort of a polar opposite to you in terms of my journey with being somebody who's comfy talking about anatomy and vaginas, sex.
Yeah. I knew going into this conversation that I think this would be a good banter back and forth, because I grew up in a polar opposite environment where like sexuality was openly talked about. It was not, we didn't stray away from anatomical words of body parts, sometimes to what I would say like the demise in some areas. However, the vast difference of our upbringings, I think, makes it funny that we've somehow found each other. I'm gonna work really hard not to make gay jokes about why I think you personally are qualified to talk about vaginas. The fun part about bringing Bridget on episode 1 is that her sister is actually the reason why this podcast idea came to light. She is the origin story, born and raised, same small town, same parental units, give or take, and sort of the same feelings around these words. And she one day was talking about something and she whispered the word vagina, and I was like, why aren't you just saying it out loud? And she whispered it again. She's like, vagina, it's weird to say. I'm like, yeah, but if you're saying it already, like you might as well say it out loud. And it started this entire conversation, this kind of running joke between the two of us and our friends of like, I'm going to start a vagina podcast and make people say the word vagina out loud. And here I am,
vagina,
making you say vagina out loud. So how do you feel now in your life day to day about saying the word vagina? How does it make you feel to talk about?
I would say like around my friends and just in my everyday life, I don't have an issue with saying vagina. I don't censor myself in that way, but I would say like going back to my small town, being around my family, meeting new people, like when I'm not sort of warmed up to them, like I would still sort of like maybe dance around saying any type of graphic words, even though is vagina a graphic word, or have we just decided that it's gross and weird to say? Yeah. So I feel confident in my vagina capability.
These days. I said I wasn't going to make a gay joke, but you're making it so hard.
I know, this is hard.
It's okay. It's funny. So was there like a pivotal moment for you that you can remember that was like, oh, I used to be like socialized or incredibly uncomfortable in this topic and now I'm not?
Yes. Like
the big sigh.
Yeah. Rural Ontario life is, you know, very, I wouldn't say it's very sex forward or like there wasn't a lot of talk about the birds and the bees, or even that is a weird one.
Yep.
Why can't I just say, like, why don't people just say sex? There wasn't a lot of talks about sex. There wasn't like a culture around being like incredibly open about even things like sexual health. It was more of like a private, discreet thing. And so growing up, like never having addressed any of that, any of those topics is like then finally getting to grade 4 or 5 when you start learning like sex education and like health class and those dreaded awkward classes.
Which in Ontario, for anyone maybe listening with the same provincial experience or with a different viewpoint, is really not that thorough. Like it's like it's not 2 or 3 days where you talk about a condom and conception and how you shouldn't get pregnant, and that's like mostly it. And like don't get an STI.
Yeah, well that's more like down like closer to high school, but even just in the beginning, like you're just talking about anatomy, right? And so for some reason the boys and the girls get split up. They go to different classes. The boys talk about penises and what's going on with their own anatomy, and the girls are talking about reproductive health, like, or reproduction, period, vaginas, like learning all the anatomy. And I have a vivid memory of like being in health class when I'm like 11 years old or however old. The teacher's just like trying to explain basic anatomy to us, and every time she says the word vagina, like every single girl in the class snickers, is like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. Can't keep it together, or like is very clearly uncomfortable. And so she rounded us up, took us outside. We all spread out in the soccer field of the schoolyard, and she's just like, I'm gonna count down from 3 and you're going to scream the word vagina like over and over again until it becomes like desensitized. And so we're just like all out. There's like 11-year-old girls, there's like 20 of us, and we're just all like vagina in the field. And I'm sure like, you know, the people neighboring the schools are like, what are they teaching these children? And I mean, it worked. Like we could go back and learn about vaginas and not be so uncomfortable, but it was very like, it's a good example of how just like up until that point, like probably most of us had never heard it being referred to, like our anatomy being referred to a vagina, like the proper term.
Yeah,
like
it used to be like your private parts.
Your privates.
Yeah.
Whatever. Oh, there's too many words.
I know. I also feel like that story of like getting out in the field and yelling the word vagina, like I can full on see our like queer group of 20 something friends just like after a bar night on the street doing the same thing.
I love you.
I'm like shocked we haven't done it yet, frankly.
Yes. It's I mean, it worked. Like it was helpful to sort of destigmatize like using that language even.
Yeah. And I feel like I've seen a pivot recently, at least in, you know, my social feeds, of even switching from the word vagina to the word vulva, because you're talking about specific parts of that part of your body, and there are differentiations between all the different pieces in there. And I mean, I am ashamed to admit like when I learned what a clit was, because it wasn't early enough.
Well, you learn like that, all of the anatomy parts, but like you refer to the whole thing as a vagina, which like reduces it down to the
reproduction
inside parts and reproduction, and like how strange, like, I mean, it's not surprising, but how strange is that when you really unpack it, right?
Well, and I recall like in this same like boy girl split class in grade 4, I think it was, like reflecting on it. Actually, this would have been probably grade 7 when we were doing this, but you know, you learn how to put a condom on a banana.
Oh God.
And I remember talking to my brothers about it like later in life. And I was like, what did you learn? Like when you were in a different classroom from me, like what did you learn? And they're like, we put a condom on a banana. We watched a video about pregnancy and how pregnancy works. And I was like, you didn't look at a vagina? I had to look at a penis. I had to put a condom on a pretend penis. You didn't have to do any. Nope. Just learned how babies are born. Like, cool. So glad you know so much about anatomy.
And that's why you can't find the clit.
Yeah, facts. Oh, hey, don't mind me politely interrupting your podcast listening for a cheeky little sponsor. I feel so lucky for Joni to be the first sponsor of Say It I Dare You, because I have been a lover of their products and a supporter of their brand for a long while now. Joni is all about 21st century period care. They ditch the stigma and the chemicals on their mission to make sustainable accessible with their organic, chemical-free period care products. Conventional petroleum-based plastic pads take over 300 years to break down. Joni uses compostable and biodegradable materials, making your period care better for both you and the planet. I personally have been using Joni pads for a while now, and I can confidently say that their gentle, fragrance-free, breathable pads are just so good. I don't experience any irritation. I feel confident in what I'm putting in and on my body, and it also just feels good to be part of a bigger purpose. When you support Joni, you're also supporting greater period equity in your communities. So, without further ado, go to getjoni.ca/SIIDY for Say It I Dare You to get 10% off site-wide. 5% of their revenue goes towards giving back to communities in need, and if you buy their pads like I do, I would love to share in my weird obsession with their really great packaging, so please let me know. Again, that's getjoni.ca/SIIDY, Joni spelt Joni, for 10% off, and the link will also be in the description. So, a question I'm really eager to ask you this question. We've been together 7 years as of this Saturday. And we've had a lot of growth together. But one of our biggest differences is this like introvert versus extrovert dynamic that we have and love. You kind of being more shy to speak about taboo topics, me being not shy enough to speak about taboo topics. I want to know what that experience is like for you, if it's like exposure therapy or if you have to like grin and bear it. What's it like?
I would say grin and bear it is a great explanation of that experience for me. I think it's just one of those things where you're like socialized. Well, not you, obviously, but I'm socialized. I've been socialized in my upbringing of a very like complacent, nice, polite environment. Mm-hmm. And like, how weird is that like being polite and being complacent and like being kind is like not to mention things that are just very true to like the human experience, which is like having anatomy, talking about the experience of having anatomy. And so, yeah, like being around you and like your family and, you know, going off to university, being exposed to all different types of people for me was like a bit of a shock of like, oh yeah, I can very much talk about these things. I can say vagina and like not get scoffed at, or like, yeah, I found like I really like tried to embrace it when I was out of that context. And so I like swung completely in the opposite direction and was just like, I embraced my vagina and like, you know, went right into exposing myself to those like sex positive
conversations. Yeah,
just like conversations and topics. So yeah, being around you, who is so like, you're like just so unafraid to say those things, is great. And it's like, it's great to be around and to like be in an environment where it's like very talked about. And then when you and I go back to my tiny little town, and the etiquette is very different. Yeah.
We have a pinch policy where if we're sitting next to each other and I start talking about something that like Bridget just can't get through, she just like pinches my leg and I know it's time to stop talking.
I just give you a nice little pet and just be like,
Yeah.
Maybe save that one.
Yeah.
For
Or she'll
day.
look at me lovingly and I'm like, I know what you're saying.
This person has probably never spoken about these topics,
Yeah.
so please go tread lightly.
It's not like I'm not immune to the like societal discomforts too. Like I, have struggled with medical issues involving my uterus, and it means nothing to me to call my mom, to call my stepmom and talk to them, and still somehow there was like a bit of a pause for me to talk to my dad about it. And I was like, why? Like my dad's never ever made me feel uncomfortable to talk about those things, but we are socialized as women to speak only to other women in private about those things.
Yeah.
And like sharing them with a man, let alone a male family member, is like a no-go. For what reason though? Like I don't know why I think that. That's not how I was raised.
Yeah.
But
it's what we're socialized to do, I think. Like, yeah, similarly, like anytime anything was going on with me in my life, like, I feel like it's normal to like go to your mom if you're like when you get your period or whatever and things like that. But like when I was younger, when I was around 13, I got mono, and there was some really unfortunate side effects of that involved like my vulva. And I just, probably at the expense of my own health, like tried to hide that because I just didn't want to open up the conversation about my experience with my vulva and like
to your parents,
to my parents, to anybody. And I went to the hospital, I dealt with that and everything's fine. But even after that, like I remember coming up with a cover story of like what really was going on. I didn't tell my friends for years. I didn't, my mom took care of me for that amount of time, and like we didn't talk to my dad about what was going on. And I don't know, it just is a funny, we got to get those boys exposed,
seriously,
to those vaginas.
Yeah, I feel like my viewpoint.
I shouldn't have maybe said that after referring to my dad.
You're right. Contextually speaking,
cut that one.
I hope it makes sense. I feel like there is this like exposure therapy fearlessness within me, at least, for better or for worse, where I'm just like, oh, sorry, you're uncomfortable. You should learn how to be uncomfortable because this is information you need to know.
Yes.
About about 52% of the population, give or take, if we're talking just the binary scale. Like, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, and it should be talked about. It's an experience that like a lot of people have, and why are we perpetuating the stigma of like vaginas are weird and gross, and like
I personally think they're great.
I think they're great. Everybody should think they're great, and like, well,
to each their own.
Yeah,
for different reasons.
Your body is your body, and it should be more normalized. I think we're getting there with further generations, but like, growing up, like this body positivity, very anatomy forward, shameless type of conversation about this it was new, and it was, you were the anomaly. So I'm happy to see it moving forward.
Me too. That was kind of my next question, is like, why do you think people feel uncomfortable talking about this? We've mentioned like your geographical experience, but you just said like generational. Like, why do you think there is those gaps in comfort?
I think there's a lot of mixing of things that don't need to be mixed, like just like the over sexualization of women, I think, is a huge contributing factor to that. Like, of course, if I was talking about my sex life or my sexuality, like, my dad or my parents or family members might have a discomfort, like a just discomfort around speaking about that with me. But me talking about having anatomy that everybody, like, my dad changed my diapers, like, he knows that that's what I've got going on. And like, it's a shame because you can't talk about your experience with a vagina or having a vagina without it being viewed as inherently sexual.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same topic of conversation surrounding breastfeeding, having breasts, exposing your breasts. Like, yes, of course, there are reasons why concealing your sexual anatomy is, for safety purposes is something that's prominent in our society. But at the same time, like, there's definitely an interesting discussion surrounding nudity and unnecessary sexualization of women's bodies, and reproductive health is not necessarily a sexual topic, or the experience of having a vagina is not necessarily a sexual topic. And so there's a huge history around that go and take a course in sex and gender or do some research of your own, but it's a very interesting topic to get into the history and how we got here with stigma surrounding the word vagina. Like, how did we get there?
Well, and even like you said, like, vaginas are not inherently sexual. A lot of the times it does have to do with the health of the person, with reproductive health, with some variation of that. And then you look at even just our, the medical community and how studies don't necessarily study on women. Or it's very far behind medical studies on men. And just that alone, like 1 + 1 = 2 in terms of why do we feel so uncomfortable talking about these things? Well, because people don't talk about them.
Exactly. I think one thing that I really love that's happening at the moment is like vulva self-love, where like, maybe you're seeing like an Instagram tile with some silhouettes of like different vulva, just to like normalize. Like, it's not very often that you're in an environment as like a young girl or like somebody who's trying to like be familiar with their body, and you're like exposed to different types of bodies and different types of anatomy. And so I think that that's a really great movement that's happening at the moment, just to be exposed to lots of different types of body parts that aren't coming from like porn, AI movies of vaginas that are just like fake, honestly. Like,
I was gonna say perfect, but like that even is a bad term to say.
It's
like,
not the standard. It's just one specific type of like sexualized vagina, vulva, that we're heavily exposed to. And so anything differing from that is not something we're ever exposed to. So I think that's a great thing that's moving us forward, and I'm happy to see content like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of a pivot here. Vagina is one of those words that people try to avoid by using euphemisms. You already said the birds and the bees earlier. Euphemism meaning like a mild or indirect way to like use a word or expression that is substituted for the actual word when the actual word is considered to be too harsh or too blunt, or you're referring to something that people might find unpleasant or embarrassing. What is your favorite euphemism for the word vagina?
There are too many really amazing euphemisms.
Give them.
For vagina. I feel like my most, my like rapid fire go-to is just Gucci. And I don't know why that just feels,
I love it,
like my natural,
it's what you're comfortable
knee-jerk
with.
reaction. But Gucci, honestly, lately I've been saying vagine, which is just incredible. Like, it's French. I don't know what it is. It's just like, vagine. It's classy vagina. I don't know what it is, but I just say vagine. It's like close enough that I'm respecting the anatomical word, maybe, or I'm just like completely demolishing it. Yeah. But
those are good ones.
I love that.
I, as the like aggressive, say the things people don't want to say, love using CUNT. Just really throws people off, especially if you say it harshly or in like a semi-British accent. It really like it makes people choke when you say it out loud, and I get a kick out of it.
I would love to know where the correlation between feline and vagina came in. That's like a subtopic follow up to this episode because
kitty cat is one of those
kitty kitty,
a little kitty
pussy, pussy cat.
I'd be curious of the etymology of that too, like why
I've even
the cat sitting on the couch right between us.
I feel like I've even referred to it as like meow.
Oh God.
Which is just horrible. But
Your
like
meow.
if I want to be like really crass, like crotch. I don't know, like that just sounds so
I feel like a lot of the ones
it's also,
that you hear
sex ambiguous.
Oh,
crotch.
Yeah. I feel like some of the ones are like hoo-ha is one that your sister uses sometimes. Or hoo-ha.
Yes.
Like what the hell is a hoo-ha?
And then like I feel like there's not enough like really insulting like words for penises because like we've got to deal with things like beef curtains or like a bologna sandwich or something.
Yeah.
Like, that's just horrible.
Well, it's like it's interesting to
like you get wiener. That's not so bad.
Well, and like when you think about it, like you can call someone a dick, and like dick is like a euphemism for a penis, and like you're calling them like rude or like it's an insult. Whereas like if you're called a pussy, it's like equated to weak, which we could get into that.
Yeah, like the vaginas are like the strongest things.
Yeah, they literally birth children.
They can take a beating.
Hell yeah.
I won't go into the specifics of that.
You're making this so difficult. I also love like nether regions down there. Like so ambiguous.
Down there. Where?
Australia. Down under.
Seriously though, like it's so funny. Or like I hate when I hear parents refer to their kids as like instead of saying vagina, they say like front bottom. Like
no,
that is fucked up. I'm sorry.
I've never heard that.
Front bottom.
Oh, that's so wrong on so many levels.
I hate that. That makes me so uncomfortable.
Oh, that
can be a separate episode.
Well, and I wonder also like there's like different euphemisms for different occasions. Like it's not like this is about to get so crass. Parents, if you're listening,
Bring
stop.
it on.
It's not like you're going to be like getting absolutely railed and the person doing that is going to be like, oh, you have such a lovely hoo-ha.
Can you imagine?
I really love your meow.
Like, oh my gosh. Oh yeah, baby. I love that crotch.
But I don't like, do people say vagina in those settings either? I don't think so. Anyway.
I can't. Yeah, my Rolodex of experiences in that department
will not come out of your mouth.
Well, I can't recall ever being referred to it by like anatomical vagina, vulva in bed. No.
Yeah. Or like, and where and why are the circumstances in which we'll use something like coochie or hoo-ha or down there versus just saying vagina. Like, I think it is like who you're talking to, what you're talking about. Does it have to do with health or sexual health? Because I feel like when it has to do with sexual health, you're less likely to use the anatomical words because health feels very like matter of fact.
Yeah.
Whereas sexuality and sexual health is very uncomfortable for a lot of people.
I've been fully in like the doctor's office and still cannot, like, I'll just dance around saying the word vagina.
Wow.
I'm just like, I don't know you. You don't know me. I don't know why.
We're posting this online, right?
What?
This podcast. You won't say it to your doctor, but here we are.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. I mean, you are all my friends.
Yeah, that's how it works.
But why go to such great lengths?
To avoid it. I can like feel your discomfort from here.
No, I'm just thinking about my experience, like, going and like getting some type of checkup at the doctor, and here I am with mine on display. But that being a context where it's like absolutely appropriate to refer. I mean, there shouldn't be a context where it's not appropriate, but like, you know, it's appropriate in that context to refer to it as my vagina. And even still, it's just like pulling teeth.
Yeah, it's difficult. So have you ever been in a situation where you have decided to like talk openly about it and it backfired? Like it made the other people really uncomfortable?
No. Which is funny because based on my experience of like how I was socialized, you would think that I've been in a lot of situations where like I've tried to say something about my experience with my vagina or something and it's like shut down, but I think it's just the general discomfort of everyone else that sort of makes you or like somebody like me who feels comfortable in other contexts like retract from speaking openly, using that type of language that isn't very beat around the bush.
That's another one, the bush.
Yeah,
I feel like you also have this perfect recipe for avoiding the topic. Like you really, really have a read on circumstances of when it might be okay. I think maybe on the opposite end of that spectrum, you might like withhold yourself from being able to talk about it openly in an area where you otherwise could, but you're worried about discomfort. But on the closed side of that spectrum, like you have been through enough experiences of your own in circumstances, geographical, generational, societal, whatever, where you knew that talking about it would not land. And so you've, like I said, you've figured out that recipe, so to speak, of when and how to not say it. So that's probably why you don't, the only situations in which it happens for you are probably by proxy being around me.
well, yeah, yes and no. Like I feel as I get older, ripe age of 26, you know, I think I've become more comfortable with being sort of unapologetic in terms of, you know, it is just the plain word for my anatomy and lots of other people's anatomy. And so I'm not going to censor myself for someone else's comfort unless the context is like very extreme.
Yeah, well, and I mean there is probably a lot of conversation. I know there's a lot of conversation around like whether or not censorship around children is important. We've both worked extensively in childcare. And I probably like I wouldn't bring it up around other people's kids because of the backlash that could have occurred. But I have also nannied for families that shared beliefs similar to mine where it was like, no, like if we're talking about that, you say it. You just say the word because that is what they have and that is what they need to learn about. But I think that is like, it is a massive conversation to even adults who might find like, okay, yeah, we can talk about it here, but why talk about it in front of kids? And then it gets into this whole like, well, why not talk about it in front of kids? It's because it's inherently sexualized. Why are things sexualized when we're talking about children? Those things should be absolutely dissected from each other.
Exactly.
There's nuance.
Yes, for sure.
It's terrifying. It's a scary world out there.
Just stay at home.
Stay home. Stay introverted. Don't go out. Don't say things.
Don't say things. No.
That's not the
that's
not
the
the
opposite
motive
messaging
for this entire
reverse
podcast.
Psychology.
Well, Bridget, thank you so much for joining me today and laughing and talking about vaginas.
It's my pleasure.
How dare you? Thank you all for listening. Please leave a comment and subscribe to Say It I Dare You if you haven't already. You can find us on Instagram and on TikTok at Say It I Dare You Pod, and we will be back next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Vagina, vagina, vagina,
Vagina.
vagina, vagina, vagina,
Vulva.
vagina. Whatever. Coochie, 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 coo. Goodbye.